first, I would like to introduce Emily Frost. And Emily is what I call the multi-talented creative. So she actually started her career first as a web designer and then become an art director. And then she got into branding. And now she's a senior manager of brand creative. And we have our first question for Emily.
So Emily, since you graduated, you have worked as a web designer, an art director, and now a brand creative manager. Could you share with us some of the most exciting things you have learned from each job?
Yes. Hi, everybody. And thank you for that intro, CJ. That was really nice. So some of the most exciting things I've learned from each job, as CJ mentioned, I've been a little bit all over the place. I'm still relatively new in my career, so kind of finding my way and kind of what I'm good at, but more importantly, what I'm bad at. And so one of the things I wanted to really promote to you guys is what I've learned, which is knowing your strengths, but more importantly, knowing your weaknesses. And I say that because I've had a little bit of some different experiences after leaving FIT. The first one being at a digital agency where I was a web designer for Samsung. And a few of my UX professors and colleagues along the way have said if you worked for Samsung, that's kind of like the rite of passage into digital design because they have such regimented brand guidelines that you really have to follow and you don't have any freedom with. So that's one thing. One thing I took away from there is to really be a pixel pusher when it calls for it. So making sure that your design is perfect for the requirements that it's calling for. And that's any web designer can tell you that. But one of the biggest lessons that I learned from there, mainly because if you do something wrong, the site just doesn't work. And that's something that you learn the hard way. And so that's the biggest takeaway from that type of role. From there, I went on to be to a traditional advertising agency, which is what I studied at FIT specifically, where I was an art director. And that's where you really you're kind of jumping into all different sorts of things. And that's probably where I find some of my strengths, which is being a big thinker. You have to kind of, when it calls for it, you're that nitpicky designer, but when it also calls for it, you're that big thinker, conceptual problem solver who needs to, figure out how to get a bunch of different pieces of the puzzle together to solve the problem at hand. And that's something I'm super passionate about and something that I probably like to do the most. And then currently I'm working as a brand creative director. So that's something that is a new entity in the brand, like in-house brand world. So you'll see like a lot of new positions are popping up, or at least I'm seeing them for a lot of in-house design roles that are calling for a brand creative. And basically what that is something that we've really developed on our own from our perspective, but it's maintaining the status and the structure of the brand's design aesthetic, tone, color, style, personality, and like what that is for a small growing brand that only has in-house creatives. So here is where I'm really learning how to be a problem solver and to really build the team based on what we need at the time and what we need for the growth of the company. So it all goes back to what I said at the beginning of this, which is knowing your strengths and knowing your weaknesses is super important, but also knowing what each project is calling for at the time it's calling for it. Is it an animator? Is it a web designer? Is it a UX designer? Is it someone who needs to come in and write copy and really design the tone of your brand? So it's really kind of looking at everything multidisciplinary and understanding what the problem is calling for. So that's kind of what I'm doing now, and it's super rewarding. I'm learning a ton. I mean, that's the one thing I try to do every day is really learn something new. If I'm not being challenged, I'm not really comfortable. So it's opened a lot of opportunities.
Great. Know your strengths, but more importantly, know your weakness. I think that's a great recommendation. And I know a lot of our audiences today, they are either recent graduates or even seniors just about to graduate. So I have a question for you, since now you're on most of the time on the other side of the table doing the hiring. So how do you value the diversity skill set that in the portfolio? Do you want to see very focused portfolio, or do you want to see a little bit of everything?
I think it depends on what the position is calling for. But when I'm looking at a candidate, I'm looking at them currently for the scope of thinking. Are they thinking about everything as a whole, or are they thinking about are they maybe too focused on one specific portion of a big project? And so maybe the design is not perfect, but the idea is out of control. It's so great. They thought about everything. They have the digital portion, they have the print portion, they have what's going on the website, how are they talking on social, and just kind of understanding how your idea or project or campaign is coming across and hitting your target in all the different ways that maybe it can hit them. I think we're all so used to that now in this digital age, I guess, that we're living in. But seeing that thinking is really what I'm looking for specifically.
That's great, because I always said design is thinking made tangible, but it sounds like for the portfolio purpose, you kind of need to make that thinking tangible as well, meaning by describing a little bit what is a problem you're going to try to solve and what was process that you went through to get to that result. So I think that's a great recommendation. Thank you.